Halo Reach's campaign is one quite unlike those you worked your way through with Master Chief during Halo Combat Evolved 2 and 3. There is still the odd moment of triumph here and there, but on the whole, the game is markedly different in tone to Bungie's fabled trilogy. Where Chief's adventures were about overcoming insurmountable odds, the story of Noble Six and company is one of despair, and no level in Reach exemplifies this better than its midway mission, Long Night of Solace. But what happened prior to it getting going, I hear you ask? Well, here's a quick rundown before we begin talking about the level itself. Joining a squad of 5 other Spartans, collectively known as Noble Team on the colony world of Reach, Noble Six travels with them to a remote agricultural region to locate the cause of a communications blackout. At first, human interference is suspected to be the cause of the problem, but soon humanity's sworn enemy the Covenant are revealed to be behind them instead. Noble Team manage to fight their alien adversary off, and are then sent to Oni Research Facility's Sword Base, where they again battle back the Covenant before meeting with Dr. Catherine Halsey, who shares that she thinks Reach's invaders are searching for information pertinent to their religion. Under cover of night, Six and teammate June then explore a Covenant-controlled area nicknamed the Dark Zone, where they soon discover something horrifying: a Covenant invasion force stationed nearby, primed and ready to attack Reach. Rather than waiting for the Covenant's next move, the UNSC decides to take the fight to their enemy, launching a counterattack which at first seems to be a moderate success, as Six and team manage to destroy a pair of anti-aircraft guns. Despite their hard work, everything ends in tragedy, however, as Covenant supercarrier the Long Night of Solace reveals itself and destroys the UNSC Grafton just as Noble Team make their escape, and it's at this point that we'll pick up the action. Long Night of Solace begins 36 hours after the battle for Sherdok Ridge began during previous mission Tip of the Spear, as Noble Team takes shelter against a now ruined landscape while a Covenant scarab passes by. It is the final time they're gathered together in the entire campaign. It doesn't make any difference in narrative terms, but I have always found it strange in a way that this cinematic wasn't used to conclude Tip of the Spear, given its early moments deal with the direct fallout of that mission's events, and it takes place in the same area. On the other hand, you could also argue it makes total sense to include it where it is, given the plan Kat then explains is one you'll soon enough find yourself carrying out.
Objective: destroy Covenant carrier in geosynchronous orbit above us.
This sanctioned, sir. What do you think? Oh.
Method: a slip space drive in lieu of the nukes we don't have. Delivery system: us. Solvable? Getting us up there. That and getting our hands on a slip space drive.
Long Night of Solace begins proper with what I would consider to be one of Halo Reach's more triumphant moments, as you storm a beach leading to the facility housing the UNSC's Sabre program alongside squadmates Carter, Kat and George. I think it sets a very appropriate tone. You will of course already suspect that Halo Reach's story doesn't have a happy ending by virtue of the campaign's very first scenes, and you might also be a tad down in the dumps after watching the Grafton go down in flames at the end of Tip of the Spear. However, as shocking as those recent scenes may have been, they're not the real gut punch. That will come soon, and so Bungie giving you a few little victories towards the beginning of the level goes a long way towards building your confidence back up before the big reveal, the campaign's midpoint twist at the end of the mission. I think that's what Long Night of Solace's opening is really all about, making you feel powerful again. At least during these early stages, you become so involved in the action directly in front of you that you begin to forget about the bad things which happened prior. Bungie quickly re-establishes your sense of pride before you experience a quite significant fall both literally and metaphorically a little while after. I'd also imagine there are more than a few of you watching who straight away thought of Halo Combat Evolved mission The Silent Cartographer when you first played through this early section. It certainly bears more than a passing resemblance, although it is arguably more intense than its counterpart. Now, don't get me wrong, the Silent Cartographer's beach sequence was very well designed for its time, taking place over a wide open area, but grouping Covenant and cover in its middle to funnel you down its centre so the action remained intense. Combined with the large squad of Marines accompanying you and Halo's theme swelling in the background, it remains one of the best moments in the entire series. Long Night of Solace dials things up to 11. It has the same excellent level design, which encourages you to push straight up through the middle of the beach, but spread across an even larger area than the Silent Cartographer. There are far more Covenant who need to be dispatched, and you're joined by 3 other members of Noble Team to make you perhaps feel like even more of an unstoppable force than you did as Master Chief previously. I mean, why have 1 Spartan when you can have 4? The fantastic, pulse-pounding track Dead Ahead is also used to further amplify events. It's a uniquely rich piece of music which makes me immediately think of this particular section whenever I hear it.
Quick, Spartan!
Comparing all 3 of the series' beach invasions, Long Night of Solace's is one which takes some of my favourite parts of the Silent Cartographers and the Covenants from 3 and blends them together. Its basic makeup matches that of the Silent Cartographer most closely, but on a grander scale, as you weave between cover and charge up the centre of the beach while battling more enemies than ever before, and it also takes 1 or 2 cues from the Covenant as well. Not only is there just as much happening in the skies above you as there is at ground level, although not quite to the same extent as in 3, there's also a somewhat hidden alternative path you can take if you manage to spot it. Reaching the second half of the encounter, you can actually break off to the left and head down a quieter path where a single wraith is soon dropped off, and after destroying it, you can head back up to the beach, emerging behind your enemy. It is essentially a different, arguably more interesting take on the smaller path to the right of the beach at the beginning of the Covenant. Before we move on, there's one more thing of note here. If you hang around on the beach instead of heading inside, the Covenant will continue to ferry in unlimited waves of reinforcements. I said earlier the beach encounter is about making you feel powerful, and that absolutely is the case, but equally this is a nice touch by Bungie which furthers a feeling of futility for the more observant. As a never-ending stream of Covenant continue to arrive on the scene, you might begin to ask the question, is there really much hope of victory? Except, when recording footage recently, I couldn't actually get it to happen. It used to. The footage I just used was from a previous video where it definitely did, but this time it didn't, despite multiple attempts on multiple difficulties across both PC and Xbox. Maybe I was doing it wrong, maybe it's been fixed because it was never meant to happen in the first place, who knows. It's a shame though, as I rather liked the idea. Respawning enemies aren't a Halo staple, so it certainly made a statement. When I first covered Long Night of Solace a good 2 or 3 years ago, I wasn't overly enamoured by the brief indoor section which follows, but nowadays I'm a bit more of a fan and understand its inclusion better. First, it acts as something of a palate cleanser. If it wasn't included, you'd jump straight from an intense battle on a beach to an intense battle in space with little time to get your bearings in between, which I think would have made for an awkward transition. And second, it continues to further that niggling feeling you may have had in the back of your mind since realising the Covenant would never stop coming on the beach, that humanity's hold on Reach remains a slender one. Parts of the facility burn, dead bodies litter its hallways, and there's even the odd Covenant foot soldier who has managed to find their way inside. The building may house Saber, the secret weapon which will hopefully help you thwart the Covenant, but it's also a rather bleak place indeed. What follows could and perhaps should have been a rather exciting new foray into space combat for Halo as Noble Six and George blast off. Unfortunately, this next big chunk of gameplay is an underwhelming affair compared to Long Night of Solace's opening scenes. The purpose behind it is much the same, to continue building up your confidence, to make you feel like the battle for Reach could still in fact be won. Your first victory of the mission was on a beach, a fairly narrow patch of land, but now you're winning fights in space, looking down on the planet you were standing on mere moments ago. It increases the scope of your success to a galactic scale, which in turn intensifies the feelings of accomplishment which come with it. The issue for me is that it comes across as being bolted on because it looks cool rather than it being a meaningful addition to the Halo sandbox. It almost feels like a Halo 4 section in its execution. In that game, there are a ton of standalone segments within missions, whether it be taking control of a Mantis towards the end of Infinity or flying the broadsword at the end of Midnight. They feel very much like detached set pieces, which give the game an almost Call of Duty-like feel at times. Fending off the Covenant in space feels similar. What Bungie normally does a tremendous job of is adding new gameplay features so that they integrate with the existing sandbox, such as the Scarabs in Halo 3 or the objective randomization of New Alexandria later on in Halo Reach. Here, you're very much separated from that, and while it makes for something different during an initial playthrough, and so is engaging enough, once you've finished it for the first time, there's little new or exciting to experience. If I were to redesign this section, I'd have it so you had to land your ship on different parts of the Anchor 9 station you're defending to repel Covenant borders, before heading out into space again to continue clearing the area. That way, flying the Sabre would be less its own separate thing, and more an inclusion which redefined how the Halo sandbox could be utilised. It would have also been a great way of setting things up early for New Alexandria, where you'd again be doing similar, except with an element of unpredictability thrown in to expand on the concept. Once you've finally finished blowing more Covenant ships than was really necessary to smithereens, a makeshift bomb is prepared, with your next task being to fly it onto a Corvette before that Corvette is then flown into the long Night of Solace under the guise of a refueling run in order to destroy it. Even with my misgivings about the first half of your time spent in space, I do still have some praise for Bungie. The Sabre's mechanics are rock solid, it's a very entertaining vehicle to pilot, and transplanting the same basic idea behind ground combat into a space setting is a clever one. The Banshees are essentially cannon fodder which can be taken down with ease, like grunts, while the Seraphs are essentially elites in spaceship clothing. First you have to bring down their shields, and then you can go in for the kill. It adds a welcome air of familiarity to a section which is quite unique in the context of Halo. The second half of the sequence, during which you attack the Corvette alongside the frigate Savannah, is also far more enjoyable than the section which precedes it. It's made all the more poignant too due to the changes happening on Reach far below. While defending Anchor 9, the planet was still bathed in blue and green tones, but as you attack the Corvette, it now burns orange. That transformation doesn't just affect Long Night of Solace either. From this point onwards, you'll likely notice greens and blues being replaced by oranges and reds as the dominant colours throughout the rest of the campaign as well. At last, boarding the Corvette against the stunning backdrop of the Savannah continuing to provide support, you're given your next objective.
Noble 6, the Savannah's countermeasures won't work forever. Find a way inside and permanently disable that cruiser's communications. As soon as we're sure the Corvette can't squawk, we'll initiate Uppercut Phase 2.
What follows is my favourite bit of Halo set in a Covenant environment, bar none. When I think of the most memorable sections like it in the series, I think of the second halves of Truth and Reconciliation and Keys in Combat Evolved. I think of Gravemind and High Charity in 2. All of them had some merit, but they also sometimes suffered from repetitive level design, featured frustrating encounters, or both. High Charity. None of them are a joy to play like Long Night of Solace's own take on the formula. It begins with you taking on the comms crew in a multi-tiered area before you move into an even bigger one designed perfectly to function as a sprawling combat arena. And you do all of this while any environmental noises are muted and the gravity isn't quite what you're used to. Also, if you opt to spare the engineer in the second area, and if your squad mates don't viciously put him down first, he'll actually casually fly off, which always makes me chuckle. Once George arrives, you take down a few more Covenant alongside a squad of Marines before you witness the Savannah's destruction.
Break off! Break off! Hull breach! Reactor's flaring! Damn it, I'm losing her! That's the last of them.
Savannah actual. Can you hear me?
Frigate's gone, 6. Nothing we could do.
Noble, you're in deep with no cover. Get that Corvette moving and get the hell out of there!
I love the way the music switches to track Belly of the Beast here. It continues to play throughout the entirety of the next encounter, and its mournful tones add a real sense of despair and dread to the moments following the Savannah's fall. Next, you fight through another visually striking area to finally activate the refueling run before heading back to George for the level's final big encounter as you fend off wave after wave of Covenant. Everything through from landing on the Corvette to the mission's final tragic scenes is perfectly paced, action-packed and varied. It is frankly tremendous. I'll be the first to admit that the bright purple aesthetic of the Covenant ships and architecture has never really been my cup of tea, nor particularly has the gameplay which occurs within them. But Long Night of Solace is the best example in the entire series of Bungie getting it completely and utterly spot on. Even with my own reservations, I cannot deny that there is not a minute throughout the level's final third during which I am not entertained. At long last, we arrive at Halo Reach's first moment of true heartbreak as George sacrifices himself to give humanity a fighting chance of victory.
Bad news is, time is fried. I'm gonna have to fire it manually.
That's a one-way trip.
We all make it sooner or later. Better get going, Six. They're gonna need you down there. Listen, Reach has been good to me. Time has come to return the favor. Don't deny me this.
Of all the members of Noble Team other than Six himself, I've always found George to be the most interesting and best fleshed out of the five, and that's hardly a surprise. Bungie of course will have planned for his death and so wisely focused on building out his character as much as possible leading up to it in order to maximise its impact. Whether it's the scenes of him speaking Hungarian or the very human way he deals with a survivor of the Covenant attack in Winter Contingency, or his almost mother and son-like relationship with Halsey, by the time he meets his makers, you know him better than any of the other Spartans who accompany you. There is also a certain sense of irony in the way he meets his maker too. The only Reach native of the group, George said he'd never leave the planet but dies in space defending it from above. A heavy weapons specialist too, he also dies from the blast of what could be described as a very heavy weapon indeed. From this point onwards, Reach becomes less of a story about humanity wrestling for control of Reach with the Covenant, and more one of them trying to find any small glimmers of hope in absolute defeat, and this twist, a gut punch half a game in the making, does a fantastic job of ushering in this change right as Long Night of Solace reaches its close.
Slip space rupture detected.
Gamma station control, reading multiple pings below the orbital defense.
Slip space rupture detected.
Yeah, we're picking up anomalies too. Are you reading it? Multiple Covenant signals.
Slip space
Is anyone listening? They're everywhere. The whole damn Covenant,
Slip
please.
space rupture detected.
In gameplay terms, Long Night of Solace is 2/3 good and 1/3 bad. The beach section at its beginning is always a joy to play and more than deserves to be mentioned in the same breadth as other similar examples in the series, and your time spent on the Corvette is a clear demonstration of how Bungie continued to hone their craft right up until their time with the series concluded. When it comes to narrative, atmosphere and aesthetic, it's wonderful from start to finish. There's always something happening to draw your attention, be it the rapidly unfolding story, the bleak surroundings of the Sabre facility, or the changing complexion of Reach while viewed from space. The stars of the show are, of course, George and the tale of his untimely demise, as well as the twist which occurs immediately after, as they absolutely should be. They make up one of the most impactful moments in any Halo title. And that's what Long Night of Solace at its core is all about, making a massive impact. It ends the first half of Reach's campaign in style and sets up its second, far darker half perfectly, and in my view it does both absolutely superbly. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and Spartans. If you had a good time, then do consider liking, subscribing and sharing your thoughts, and hopefully we'll meet again soon.